Do you even need me to tell you what my secret source is? Do you already know what I'm going to say? It is now August, which means that readers around the world are already diving in to one great reading event, and that is, of course, Women in Translation Month. Women in Translation Month was founded in 2014 by Maytal Rudzinski, and it was originally an event to address the underrepresentation of women writers translated into English. But it has now grown into an event that celebrates women writing in any language and being translated into any other language. It is an incredible opportunity and reminder of the power of reading something written by someone who comes from a completely different background with different experiences and different culture than your own. And it has grown into such a huge and celebratory event. And I, of course, have for you the best source for finding the best books by women in translation. And do I even need to say what my source is? I don't even need to say it. You know what I'm going to say. Independent publishers, of course. If you are participating in Women in Translation Month this year, what are you going to read? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what your plans are. So what I'm going to do in this video is give you an amazing list of independent publishers who are incredible resources for women in translation. But before I do that, I want to tell you about my plans for this August. If you've been watching any of my videos this summer, you know that I have been embarking on a reading project, a reading experiment. I'm calling it my slow reading experiment. And what I'm going to do is try out different methods of slowing myself down when I read. And I have another video about it that I'll post somewhere around here if you want to check it out. But one of my methods is reading books that were originally written in French, reading them. I will be reading them in French, and then also reading the English translation of those books. And this will definitely slow me down for sure. It's been a long time since I've read a full book in French. My specific plans for this month are actually to read a few books by Annie Ernaux, who is a previous winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature. And she is published in the US by Seven Stories Press, which is an amazing publisher. You can actually go on their website and order a box set of all of the books, all of Annie Ernaux's books that they have published. If you want to check that out, highly recommend it. I don't have a full box set, but I do have 3. So I'll be reading these in English. I don't have the French versions yet, but hopefully they'll be arriving soon. And I think this is a really cool way to participate in Women in Translation Month. I would love to expose myself to the art and science of translation by actually seeing the translation of a couple books and seeing like how the words change, what words actually make it onto the page for the English version. I have Simple Passion, Happening, and the Years by Annie Ernaux here. So many indie publishers include works in translation as part of their overall catalog, but there are also several publishers who focus entirely or almost entirely on work in translation. And that's mostly what I want to share with you today is a big long list of publishers in the US, the UK, and Canada who really focus on works in translation. And what I'm going to do is share a little bit about each publisher and then also share one-ish book from each publisher that caught my eye recently. And then at the end, I will share my number one tip, my biggest tip for finding and buying books by women in translation from these publishers. My number one tip for this month and forevermore that you can keep and have for free. I will give it to you. But first up, I have a big long list of publishers and we'll start with the US. Okay, so for publishers in the US, and I am in the US, so this is my biggest section here. We have one of my favorites is Two Lines Press. They are part of the Center for the Art of Translation based in the Bay Area in California. The Center for the Art of Translation does more than just publishing. They have educational programming, they have a journal, they have a lot of different stuff, and they were founded in 2013. They specialize in exceptional new writing and overlooked classics that have not been previously translated into English. I have a bunch of books from Two Lines Press. I bought them last year during Women in Translation Month, I thought I would point out that Woodworm by Leila Martinez, which is translated from Spanish by Sophie Hughes and Annie McDermott, was published by Two Lines Press. And I wanted to mention that because I feel like this has been getting a good amount of buzz on social media lately, and so wanted to point out that they were published by Two Lines Press. This is a haunted house novel and a domestic class-conscious horror, and it's told in alternating point of view chapters by an unnamed grandmother and granddaughter who live in this haunted house. Next up, a beloved indie press called Archipelago, and they are a not-for-profit press devoted to publishing excellent translations of classic and contemporary world literature. I have a few books from Archipelago, and I definitely want to collect more for sure. In their first 18 years, they have brought out close to 200 books from more than 35 languages. And one book that caught my eye recently is called What Kingdom by Fine Grabel, translated from Danish by Martin Aitken. And this is a novel that is an account of a young woman's daily life in a temporary psychiatric care unit for young people in Copenhagen, and it's gotten a lot of very, very high praise. Another one of my big favorites is Transit Books, and Transit Books is a nonprofit publisher of international and American literature. It is also based in the Bay Area. They were founded in 2015, and they are committed to the discovery and promotion of enduring works that carry readers across borders and communities. Transit Books publishes a carefully curated list of award-winning literary fiction, narrative nonfiction, essay, and literature for children. One book I will mention that was published by Transit Books and has gotten a lot of buzz also recently is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman, translated from the French by Roz Schwartz. And again, this has gained a lot of attention recently. And it's about a group of women who live imprisoned in a cage with no memory of how they got there. And then specifically the story of one very young woman who has lived her whole life there. World Editions is a publisher that I don't think I have any of their books. I might have one, but they've definitely caught my eye, and I have a bunch from them that I want to check out. They were founded in 2013 and became fully independent in 2023. They promote voices from around the globe by publishing books from many different countries and languages into English translation. And they say they aim to enhance dialogue between cultures, foster new connections, and open doors which may otherwise have remained closed. They published Maryse Condé, a lot of her work, but one book in particular that caught my eye a while ago when it came out is Foul Eulogies by Lucy Rico, translated by Daria Chernesheva, and it's about a vegetarian woman who, after her mother's death, returns home to run the chicken farm she grew up on. And I just love that premise completely. Open Letter is a publisher that is housed under the University of Rochester. They are a nonprofit literary translation press. They publish 10 titles in translation each year and run an online literary website called 3%, and that number 3% will come up again in a bit. And they say making world literature available in English is crucial to opening our cultural borders, and its availability plays a vital role in maintaining a healthy and vibrant book culture. And one book they have on their website coming out is called The Vladivostok Circus by Eliza Shua Dusapin, translated by Anissa Abbas Higgins. And it's about a young fashion designer who arrives at the circus in Vladivostok, Russia, to design costumes for a trio of performers about to perform the extremely dangerous act called the Russian Bar. And if you don't know what the Russian Bar is, YouTube some videos, please. It's pretty remarkable. They also have a really cool thing where you can buy their first 25, 50, 75, or 100 books that they have ever published. I don't know if I have the $500 to spend on their first 100 books, but I really wish I did. Then we have Zephyr Press. Zephyr Press was founded in 1980, and it's an award-winning nonprofit independent press who focuses on contemporary poetry and prose in translation, focusing mostly on Russia, Eastern Europe, and Asia, but they also publish literature from other languages and the US. And they also reprint books of literary and historical value that have long been out of print. Most of their books, they say, are actually bilingual on facing pages, which is very cool. And the majority of their translated titles are the first books to appear in English by those authors. You can, on their website, filter their collections to show only women in translation, which I think is very cool and helpful. And one book that jumped out to me was a book they published a while ago called The Future of Silence, an anthology of fiction by Korean women spanning writing from the 1970s up until present day. And it was selected and translated by Bruce and Juchan Fulton. If you are looking for poetry in translation specifically, a lot of these publishers publish poetry, but world poetry might be a good publisher for you to check out. It's a nonprofit publisher of poetry and translation, founded in 2017 and based in New York City. And I'll mention two books here that are coming out soon that caught my eye. The first one is called The Escapades by Marie-Noëlle Agneau, and it's translated by Jessie Hover Amar. It comes out in October. It is inspired by Ovid's story of Okairo. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's the myth of a woman who was transformed into a horse. There's also O by Judith Kiros, translated from Swedish by Kira Josephson. And this sounds so good. It is an alternative take on Shakespeare's Othello that addresses genre, race, gender, blackness, colonialism, and more. I am definitely checking that out. In the UK, I have 4 publishers specifically to mention, and these publishers are on my radar entirely because of the most recent long list for the Republic of Consciousness Prize in the UK. All 4 of these presses were represented there. Well, one of them I already knew about, but the other 3 were new to me. And so if you don't know about that prize, that's a great source to find independent publishers in the UK. And then there's also a US and Canada version of the prize as well. So the first publisher I'll mention is Jantar Publishing. They were founded in 2011, and they were originally established to publish previously inaccessible works of Central European literary fiction. And they have now expanded to a wider range of European literary fiction, but they were originally dedicated to Central European fiction, and so that remains the largest part of their catalog for sure. I'll mention one author specifically that they publish, which caught my eye. So they publish books by Ivana Dobrakovova, who is well known in her home of Slovakia as the Slovakian translator of Elena Ferrante. And Jantar has published one of her short story collections called Monsters and Truckers, and a novel called Bellevue. I just thought that was a really cool tidbit that she is not only a writer of her own fiction, but also the translator in Slovakia of Elena Ferrante. Fum de Stampa is a publisher that was established in 2020 to specifically bring Catalan language literature to an English-speaking language, so very specific. But recently they've started to publish literature and translation from other languages as well. One book that caught my eye recently that came out, I think within the last year, is called Through the Forest by Laura Alcoba, translated by Martin Monroe Griselda. And this is the story of a narrator who is tracking down the survivors of a very horrible family tragedy that took place in the 1980s when a mother drowned 2 of her children in a bathtub. And so this narrator in present day is trying to track down members of that family to reveal kind of the full story of what happened. Les Fugitives is a press founded in 2014 that publishes, wait for it, only short books by specifically award-winning Francophone female authors who have not yet ever been translated into English. Did you get that? Very specific. A great press to check out if you're in the UK for the month of August. So one book they have coming out recently, or just recently came out, is called Célina by Catherine Axelrad, translated from the French by Philip Terry. And this novel was drawn from Victor Hugo's diary entries and letters, and it tells the story of a teenage chambermaid who lived in the Hugo household and who was apparently, quoting from the publisher, prey to the great man's gargantuan sexual appetites. And it's described as an arresting depiction of enduring matters of sexual consent and class relations. And then finally, a well-beloved Press publishes in the UK, originally was in the UK, but also now distributes to North America, and that is Charco Press. Charco means puddle in Spanish and is also a word that is often used to describe the Atlantic Ocean. So Charco's entire mission was to bring outstanding Latin American literature from Latin America across the puddle to the English-speaking world. There are so many books I could mention here, so many to choose from. They published Claudia Pinheiro, Selva Amada, but one that I've read that I'll mention is called The Adventures of China Iron, and this is by Gabriela Cabazon Camara, translated by Fiona McIntosh and Iona McIntyre. And this book charts and reclaims the adventures of China Iron, who was the abandoned wife of the gaucho Martin Fierro, Martin Fierro was the famous character from Jose Hernandez's epic Argentine poem. So for Canadian publishers, I don't actually have a list of Canadian publishers who are completely dedicated to translated works. If you know of any, please let me know in the comments. But I do have 3 presses that I love that not only publish great women in translation, but also make it very easy on their websites to find the books in translation that they publish. So I thought I'd mention them here. The first is one of my most favorite publishers, Biblioasis. They are a literary press based in Windsor, Ontario. They publish 20 to 30 works each year, and that often includes translated work by women. You can filter their books to show their international translation series if you go to their websites. And one book I'll mention that, again, has gotten a lot of praise is The Future by Catherine Leroux, translated by Susan Uriu. And this was winner of Canada Reads 2024. This is a dystopian novel and alternate history in which the French never surrendered Detroit. There's pollution and poverty here and strange and magical things like a kingdom of children living in the trees. Coach House Books was founded in 1965 and is based in Toronto, and they publish innovative and experimental poetry, fiction, drama, and nonfiction. The press is particularly interested in writing that pushes the boundaries of a convention, and you can, again, filter their books by work in translation. Within the past year, they've published a novel called To the Forest by Anaïs Barbeau-Lavalette, and this was translated by Rhonda Mullins. This is a story of a family who is forced to return to the mother's childhood home in the forest during the pandemic, and they live cramped together in a small 100-year-old house. And to escape each other, they turn to the forest and eventually discover a quieter life and recapture what it means to be alive. Book Hug Press, a press that I don't currently own anything from, but I am super eager to remedy that situation. They describe themselves as a radically optimistic Canadian independent publisher working at the forefront of contemporary book culture. They say we specialize in dynamic and contemporary literary fiction, narrative nonfiction, poetry, and literature and translation. Again, you can filter their books by literature and translation. And one book coming out in October that sounds incredible is called Caesarea by Hannah Nordenhoek, translated by Saskia Vogel. This is set in a remote country estate in the 19th century at the dawn of modern gynecology, and a renowned obstetrician keeps a young girl who he once delivered via C-section. And this is described as a Gothic fairy tale, lush and dreamlike, and the girl lives as if in a dollhouse, confined and reduced to a curiosity. That's the list I'm going to share with you today. There are a lot of glaring omissions, including heavy hitters who publish a ton of books by women in translation, such as New Directions, Fitzcarraldo, New York Review Books, Tilted Axis, Europa Editions. I could have made a much longer list, but then we would be here all day long. If you have any favorite independent publishers who publish a lot of work in translation, I hope you will put them in the comments below so we can all continue to learn from each other. I think that would be so cool. So what is my biggest tip? My biggest tip, and I've shared it before in other videos. My biggest tip is if any of these publishers or other publishers kind of spark your interest, sign up for their email newsletters. So many of them have sales for Women in Translation Month. Pretty decently reduced price sales. And the best way to find out about their sales throughout the year for all sorts of different occasions is to sign up for their newsletters. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves thinking that the way to participate in a reading month is to read a stack of books that correspond with that reading month, but that is not the only way to participate. You can purchase a book or two by a woman in translation, especially from an indie press. That is an amazing way to support Women in Translation Month with your actual purchasing power, is by choosing those books to buy this month. You don't have to read them this month, but think about maybe buying a book or two this month or getting them from the library, whatever it is. Also, talking about books by women in translation in the month of August on social media or just with a friend. Tell a friend about a book that you read by a woman that was translated and spread the word about it, or ask your friends what books they've read by women in translation. Look for recommendations. You don't have to participate by reading a huge stack of books. There are lots of ways to participate in Women in Translation Month. You cannot get out of this video from me without a big picture conclusion, because that's just my style. Let's talk about why indie presses are such a great source for women in translation. Why is that? According to Archipelago's website, and this was also mentioned on several other publishers' websites, but Archipelago says, sadly, less than 3% of new literature published in the United States originates outside the Anglosphere. So that 3% includes writers of any gender. 3% of books published in the US are translated, only 3%. And even within that very small 3%, women are underrepresented within that already small 3%. The large corporations that dominate the US publishing industry are risk averse. They are corporations and they are concerned with the bottom line. So they're less likely to publish books in categories that might not be sure to make them some money. But it's kind of a vicious cycle, because if books by women in translation are already such a tiny minority of all the books published, then corporations aren't going to take the financial risk to publish more of them because they aren't proven sellers, right? So that's not to say you can't get any books by women in translation from the largest corporate publishers. You totally can. But you'll notice they're often classics or modern classics or books by women writers who are already proven. They're already well-known, award-winning. They're a proven sure bet. That's why indie presses are such an important part of the publishing ecosystem, because they do take risks and they're more likely to publish books that are in categories that maybe aren't super known for selling well. So like debuts and books that really push a lot of boundaries or experimental work, or books that aren't easily put into certain categories. They're hard to market because they don't really fall into a certain genre or category. And that's because selling well is not necessarily the metric that an independent publisher is going to use to choose what they're going to publish. Often they have a particular mission behind the books that they choose to publish and put out into the world. And so what they choose to publish is driven first by that mission and not by profit. So that mission is what is driving their catalog. And very often for independent publishers, cultural exchange is a huge part of their mission. So they're going to be excited to publish literature in translation, and women in translation in particular. As I've been exploring these independent publishers more and more and reading the stories of their founders, a lot of them have really great stories about how their experience with international and translated literature really shaped them as readers and as thinkers and as people. And so one of the reasons behind starting some of these independent publishers is wanting to do that for other readers, wanting to make sure there's always going to be a place to find those kinds of books. In conclusion, I would say don't rely on listicles that you find online for building a TBR for your Women in Translation Month, either this month or in the future. try going directly to some of these publishers' websites, and so we saw a lot of them you can filter by books in translation. A lot of them in the month of August, right on their front page, they have a category for women in translation. You can go there and explore for yourself and probably find books you've never heard of. And that is a really cool way to build a TBR, I think. If you like this kind of thing, I hope you'll check out my newsletter. I'll leave a link for it below. Every month, I send a big long list of books that I've found that were published the previous month by independent publishers and university presses. And every single month, a ton of books on that list are translated works, are books in translation. So if that kind of thing is up your alley, I hope you'll sign up for my newsletter. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Sarah. I'll talk to you later. Bye.